Hello everyone, welcome to Tech with Machines. We are back with another popular interview question, specifically asked on Google Cloud Dataflow. When does a Dataflow pipeline actually acknowledge a PubSub message? This looks like a simple question, but in interviews, most engineers get it wrong. In this video, we will break down PubSub ACK semantics in Dataflow streaming pipelines. And by the end, you will know exactly how to answer this question and specifically understand it end to end and avoid any production bugs if you have been working on the data flow. Just to be clear, this video is more for them who work on the data flow. And I recently had an opportunity to interview a senior software engineer who has worked on the data flow. And when I put across this question to him, he was not very clear how it works. So I thought, why not create a video and explain this interview question, which might be asked to you also if you have been working on the data flow. Now, here is the problem statement. We have a streaming data flow pipeline where PubSub is the source, PubSub is also the sink. And in between, we have multiple do functions and a database write. The question is simple. When does Dataflow acknowledge the source PubSub message? Now, this question matters because it directly impacts retries, duplicates, and data loss. So you might think that this is not the perfect interview question, but it does. It also helps you to answer the retries or the duplicates or the data loss which you might be having in your data flow. That's why your data flow is slow and you are not able to answer why. So let's move ahead. Let's say this is your pipeline architecture. A message is read from PubSub. It goes through multiple do functions grouped under a single transformer. Then there is a database write followed by a transformation, and finally the message is published to another PubSub topic. One important detail. Grouping multiple do functions into a composite transform does not change how PubSub acknowledgements work. So let's be clear about that. Now, what is a common confusion around the PubSub ACK deadline? Let's say your PubSub subscription has an ACK deadline of 10 minutes. Most people assume that the message must be fully processed within 10 minutes, otherwise it will be redelivered. This assumption is wrong when data flow is the subscriber. Now, what actually happens? How data flow consumes PubSub? Data flow acts as a managed PubSub subscriber. It doesn't acknowledge the message when it is read. It does not acknowledge the message after the first do function. Instead, Dataflow keeps the message in an in-flight state while the pipeline is processing it. Now, here's a key concept you must remember, which is called ACK deadline extension. Dataflow will automatically extend the PubSub ACK deadline when the message is being processed. As long as your worker is alive and the element is still in flight, Dataflow periodically tells PubSub, I'm still working on this message, don't redeliver it yet. So how is the scenario here? Let's walk through a concrete example. The ACK deadline is 1 minute, but the database write takes 2 minutes. Worker is still alive. So at around 50th second, Dataflow extends the ACK deadline. At around 80th second, Dataflow again extends the deadline. At around 90-second, Dataflow again extends the deadline, and at around 120-second, which is exactly 2 minutes, pipeline completes and message gets ACKed. So this tells us when the entire pipeline finishes successfully at 2 minutes, only then does Dataflow acknowledge the message. So in this case, there is no redelivery. But when is the message basically not acknowledged? It will not be acknowledged if your do function is throwing an exception, which is a runtime exception, or if the database write fails, or if the PubSub sync fails, or worker crashes or restarts. But there is a critical interview trap here. Specifically, what will be the NT pattern where the data flow will consider the message to be successful and acknowledge it when you are explicitly catching a database exception and not throwing it. So you have swallowed the exception. So Dataflow here is thinking that write has succeeded. So this is a critical NT pattern which you have to ensure that you are not swallowing any exception. Otherwise, Dataflow is going to consider it as successfully acknowledged. This will lead to a silent data loss, and it's one of the most common production bugs. Now, PubSub provides at least once delivery. Now, they have also introduced exactly once delivery. This means with at least once delivery, it means that the same message can be processed multiple times even though the acknowledged deadline has not expired. With exactly once delivery, it ensures that message is redelivered only once the acknowledgement deadline is expired. Now, because of this, your database writes must be idempotent, otherwise you will be writing same row multiple times, and downstream systems should be able to handle the duplicates. Exactly once processing doesn't redeliver the message until the acknowledgement deadline expires. Now, what is a mental model here? Mental model which you should remember for the production as well as for the interview is that the AG deadline is answering the question, are you still alive? And actual acknowledgement answers the question, are you completely done and successful? Dataflow acknowledges a PubSub message only after the entire pipeline, including syncs, finishing successfully. So here I would like to ask you guys a follow-up question, and let's see if you are able to answer it in comment section. What if database succeeds but sync fails? What if worker crashes mid-processing? Does grouping do functions into a composite transform change anything? If you understand acknowledgements, all these answers become obviously. So these could be the multiple follow-up questions. Now, if with this video, if you're able to answer this, you have actually answered similar type of questions around data flow. Now, what are the final takeaways of this video? That acknowledgement is not equal to message read. Acknowledgement is not equal to a single do function completion. Acknowledgement only happens once the full pipeline succeeds. You should always design for retries, duplicates, and failures. So never swallow your exceptions. If this video helped you understand Dataflow and PubSub better, hit like and subscribe. Drop a comment for the interview questions, follow-up interview questions, and try to answer them. Or drop a comment if you have faced this question in interviews, or hit issues with duplicate data in production. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.